We're back, baby. Dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. What's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and welcome back to another video. Today I got my review of Saw X, or Saw 10, the newest film in the long-running Saw series. And before I give you guys my thoughts on this movie, be sure to hit that like button, comment your thoughts on this one down below, as well as your expectations for the movie if you have not yet seen it. Subscribe and hit that notification bell to help me reach my goal of 100,000 subscribers here on the channel. And check out the Unusual Couple podcast link down below for weekly episodes with myself and my girlfriend Cam. Alright, so when it comes to the Saw franchise, I've been a fan of these movies since 2020. That's when I first watched them all. Shout out to my girlfriend for introducing me. Also shout out pretty much it, especially Eric, for doing commentary tracks to guide me through the later films because, man, they can be brutal watches at times. But the first Saw film, to this day, is a top 3 horror film for me. So going into this, you're bringing back, John Kramer. Takes place between Saw 1 and 2. I had pretty high expectations, especially hearing some of the buzz on Twitter praising it. So I went in pretty excited for this one, and I walked out feeling pretty good. As good as I can, because I just watched people get tortured for a few hours, but hey, you know what I mean. In fact, there's a lot to like with this movie, so I'm going to start with everything positive, I have to say. To me, a big standout with Saw X is the fact this movie takes its time early on, and it doesn't rely on a gimmicky trap to open the movie just to hook the viewer and be like, look at this disgusting trap and this person's getting torn apart. They didn't do that out the gate. It's more so a character study on John Kramer. For about the first 30-ish minutes, I want to say, we really dive into him as a human being. Like, this movie takes the time to humanize him, and it actually makes you root for him later on. I'll get into that more a little bit later. In fact, this movie's a bit of a slow burn for the first act, I would say. It's taking its time. We don't really have many traps per se, and it's taking time to set up John, his situation with his battle with cancer, and how he's trying to find a remedy or cure for that. Now, the first act of this movie is slow moving, but it is necessary. I never once felt bored and was like, man, let's get to some traps. Because to me, I never go to a Saw movie just wanting to see a bunch of traps. I want to see an actual good story put to screen, and that's where this movie succeeds. It's this story about a guy who hears about this remedy for his cancer, and then he goes and explores that, but everything might not be as it seems, as we would come to discover fairly quickly. Like, this movie ended up doing the unthinkable and made us root for John Kramer versus human beings who are possibly more despicable than him. The deeper we get into this movie, the more relevant the traps become, and let me just tell you this much, these might be some of the most brutal the franchise has to offer because of how realistic they felt. To me personally, I actually was wincing, looking away at times, and even almost had to plug my ears because of the sound design of certain traps in particular, where you'll hear like just bone crunching. Some of these got under my skin like no other traps, and it's not for the faint of heart, I promise. If you're a fan of the Saw franchise, you might be accustomed to some of this, but man, did these traps just seem the most realistic. It'll be sure to turn your stomach, no doubt about it. There's some twisted things that take place. Now, one of the biggest draws for this movie is that Amanda is back, and the film, like I mentioned up front, takes place between Saw 1 and 2, so a lot of this film gets to explore the relationship between John Kramer and Amanda and the mentorship, and how John is essentially mentoring her to take on his life's work once he ultimately passes. And the scenes between the two of them were by far my favorites. Again, I don't go to a Saw movie to watch a trap. I like to watch the mystery and story surrounding that, and the mentorship that John provides Amanda, by far my favorite. There are moments where Amanda is questioning what they're doing and even feels guilt at times. You can see it in her eyes as she relates to one of the victims who is about to be put into a trap. And it further adds to the depth of these characters so that when I go back and rewatch the franchise, I'll be able to appreciate some little scenes or details even more, notably involving John and Amanda, because they are one of the better duos in this series. And this movie in particular really gives them their time to shine and fleshes out their relationship, I'd argue, more than any other project has thus far in the franchise. And of course, visually, this movie oozes Saw. You've got the iconic editing that's just pure chaos, and you've got that color grading where there's a bit of a green tone to everything, especially some of the traps. So it feels like a Saw movie. I know people have complained about Jigsaw and Spiral not feeling like Saw movies. This feels like classic Saw, so again, hardcore fans of the franchise will eat this up. Now, I don't think this movie's perfect. I do have some nitpicks or issues with it, and my big one, I'm not going to get into spoilers here, so don't worry, is I was waiting for that, iconic Saw ending or finale that really got me good. And I felt like this movie was lacking in a way. Now, it is limited by its actual timeline. The movie takes place between Saw 1 and 2, so not much too crazy could go down. Of course, we still get the big climactic third act, but it didn't hit to me as much as other Saw films, and maybe that's just my personal expectation being too high for the finale of a Saw movie, but it just felt a little tame in my eyes. Or underwhelming, I should say. Another big critique I have is the structure of this movie. Like, the first 30 minutes of this movie was some awesome setup for John Kramer and why he's gonna get into enacting all these traps on these different people. But once you get into that middle portion of the movie, it just becomes like trap after trap for like, I'd say another 30 minutes. So we started out really strong and then it fell victim to the common tropes of the Saw franchise. Now, I know it can't abandon that, trust me. I know what a Saw movie is and why a lot of people go to watch them. But to me, I've never really been crazy about the traps, and it felt like we didn't really get a long break between traps. It was just, here's a trap, here's a trap, here's a trap. Not a lot going on between. It would have been more interesting if they maybe cut away and gave us a little bit more of John and Amanda at times, when to me it felt like we were going, here's a really gruesome, brutal trap, and then we'll wait a second, and then here's another really gruesome, brutal trap, and then we'll wait, and then we'll do it again, and it's like, it just got monotonous for me, very repetitive in its formula. Now again, I know they kind of have to put that in the movie because that's where they make their money. Like, a lot of people go to the Saw movies to see some disgusting shit go down, but it's never been the big draw for me personally. I love the first Saw the most because it is story and character first, and the movie was doing so well with that until it fell into its old ways with trap, trap, trap in the second act. And I'd say aside from John and Amanda, every other character in this movie is pretty disposable. Not the best performances, didn't really care about them. A lot of them were just really people, so I didn't mind if they got torn up in some trap because they did horrible things. Now again, as I sit here and look at the overall movie, it is a clear win for the Saw franchise. It returns to the roots, puts an emphasis on John Kramer as a character, and the actual main storyline is solid, which lacks in a lot of the other Saw films. To me, it still falls victim to some of the tropes that I grew to not love so much in later entries in the Saw films, but overall, this is a really solid entry in the series. It's not my outright favorite, but I think it's gotta be top tier, like objectively damn near. Most people will probably agree, if they're fans of the Saw franchise or not. This is a movie that's actually watchable. It adds so much depth to John Kramer and Amanda as characters, and it does give you your classic fix of the gory, brutal traps if you're into that kind of stuff. And if you're a fan of this franchise at all, there's a post-credit scene that is a must-watch. My theater was clapping, and you couldn't help but be pretty hyped up for it. I wouldn't mind if we got some more prequel Saw films, though I'm not sure if there's a lot of room to squeeze any in the timeline at this point. They might need to continue on, like, post-Spiral. Who's to say? But like I said earlier, this is a clear win for the Saw franchise, one of the better entries, and what's most impressive to me is that it takes so much time to develop the characters, a trait that is lacked in a lot of these other films. It's a win for Saw, and I'm glad to say that I survived to tell the tale. But those are just my thoughts on Saw X. Let me know yours in the comments down below, and be sure to hit that like button. Stay tuned for my ranking of all the Saw films coming very soon. Subscribe and hit that notification bell to help reach my goal of 100,000 subscribers here on the channel. It will mean a lot. And stay tuned for just more content as we approach October. Lots to look forward to this fall season. But thank y'all as always for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys later.